Hi everyone, BioPharmaDispatch here. I am here the day after the 2021 budget with Liz de Soma, the CEO of Medicines Australia. Hello, Liz.
Hello, Paul. Nice to see you.
Pretty major event for you. What are your first impressions?
I think it's an extraordinary budget, but as we have discussed, we are on the back of a drought followed by bushfires, followed by this extraordinary pandemic of COVID-19. And I think it's made everybody change the way they look at things, whether it's health, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's manufacturing, and many things that affect our sector.
And tell me about the outcomes for you. Obviously, the new medicine funding guarantee is significant, and you have agreed to enter negotiations or continue negotiations for a new strategic agreement with savings. Let's explore that a little. So describe these outcomes in your own words for me.
You might remember before the 2019 budget, Medicines Australia took a budget submission to the federal government suggesting that our partnership over the last decade makes the case that there is no longer a requirement for cost offsets for new medicines listings. And consistent with that, as the year progressed, we feel strongly that the enduring mechanisms that have been worked on in partnership, sometimes not in partnership with the government, have created a system that means that offsets for new medicines are no longer required. So come 2020, we felt that the case was still strong and that offsets were still not necessary in the current fiscal environment, and that there was more than enough headroom created by the system to list new medicines without requiring cost offsets. That's the position we've held. And really, the new medicines funding guarantee gives effect to that. It no longer requires offsets to be found for each new medicines listing.
So how is the $2.8 billion going to work? Because it's quite hard to sort of work it out. I suppose it's, because obviously it's in the budget, but it's not in the budget, if that makes sense.
It's definitely a policy change. And the policy change is that offsets are not going to be required for each new medicines listing. As you would know, in the past, when Medicines Australia has signed successive agreements or not, there has been a savings figure that has been earmarked as the offset in advance for new medicines. In this situation, there is an estimate of $2.8 billion in the forward funding guarantee, which is available for new listings as they come through. Any savings that are generated by any future agreement will be added on top of that $2.8 billion. So there is no savings guarantee and no savings to offset the $2.8 billion.
Now, where is the $2.8 billion?
It's a commitment that the money is available when new listings arrive, that there will be $2.8 billion over the forward estimates that will be available. And once the medicines are listed, that money will be added to the Medicare Guarantee Fund. We know that the Medicare Guarantee Fund is the net amount of money that is available for all of the existing medicines and services. And the $2.8 billion is on top of that. So as new medicines are listed, that extra money will be added to the Medicare Guarantee Fund. My understanding of it is that in the past, there had to be offsets that were found first. So money had to be found within the Medicare Guarantee Fund to list new medicines, whereas this will be money on top of.
And what transparency will there be over the spending of this money? I mean, it's not actually a line item in the budget, so it's not there. So what will you do to make sure that it's actually spent in the way that you want it to be spent? Thinking back to the 2017 example where there was the contingency, the very strange contingency reserve.
It's a great question, and I know that my members and the board will be thinking very carefully about how do we track new listings and the expenditure on new listings, and how do we see and demonstrate that there is growth in the PBS or growth in the Medicare Guarantee Fund. We certainly do have mechanisms right now to look at what is final budget outcomes, what is the expenditure, what are the rebates that come through into the annual reports, and we will be tracking all of those things to see whether there is a discernible increase and growth in the PBS that would demonstrate that the money is available and is being added on top of what's already being spent.
And what about the negotiation? So now you've committed to embark on this process, which you've already started, to complete it by May next year to get the additional 5 years. What's your approach to that process, knowing that there's already some stuff that's been nuffed out?
Again, a great question. What we have made a proactive decision is to be thinking ahead to the end of this agreement. From the minute the 2017 agreement was signed, Medicines Australia convened our experts around our membership to think about the future and what the policy settings might be in the future. We want the current agreement to run its full course until 2022, and we want to start the next agreement from 2022 for a 5-year period of time to give that longer term certainty. What we believe is the intention behind the current process, the framework for a new agreement, is that that gives us time to work collaboratively with our membership and with the Department of Health and the Minister's Office to work out what the terms of that next agreement will look like. We are not being squished into a 6-week pre-budget process to try and nut out something as important as the next 5 years of our agreement processes.
Now, we've seen the savings framework around the statutory price reductions that you're working on. What are your other priorities for that negotiation?
So we have several principles that we live by, which are supporting innovation and protecting the architecture of the PBS. They're very important to our members, ensuring that there is primacy of the prescriber, and protecting really the model that has stood us in good stead for many years, which is to encourage innovation and encourage new medicines to get listed. We know that there are policy priorities and process issues that continue to delay access to medicines, and that we will be working very hard on what are going to be the things that will make a tangible difference to that. We believe such things as comparator selection are still an issue for our members in getting a smooth pathway to listing new medicines. We know that the system of rejection and resubmission is another one. Medicines develop an evidence base that demonstrate their cost effectiveness, but there is still an uphill battle to negotiate the terms on which those listings will occur. So we will be looking at what are the really tangible things we can do in the process, as well as in the policy that supports the process, to ensure that there aren't unnecessary delays. Part of that decision-making process has been the need for offsets. When offsets are in the mind of the PBAC decision makers, when offsets are in the mind of the Department of Health, then they become a barrier to the listing decision and the cost-effective price. So the removal of the offsets policy is a major win for us because it does take at least one major barrier away from that decision-making process.
Is it clear to you and the industry how the offset policy has worked over recent years? I mean, we heard about it, I think, first 10 years ago when it was accidentally made public. And it sort of existed in the ether for such a long time. But in arguing for its removal, is it clear to you how it operates?
I can't say that I'm privy to the internal workings of either the Cabinet or the ERC when they are looking at offsets. My understanding of how it works is that the Department of Health has to demonstrate in their recommendation for a new listing that there is an offset and it has been derived through a savings somewhere else, either in the PBS or in the broader health portfolio. That might be from savings generated by the already discussed policy processes and statutory price reductions, or it may be from other areas of health. There has been some speculation in the media that there have been cuts to other programs in order to fund new medicines, and that is not how the system should work. So again, if there is not a requirement for offsets, then we will not be robbing Peter to pay Paul, as some people would describe it.
And you're in the middle of budget week.
Sorry, no pun intended, Paul.
You're in the middle of budget week. It is an unusual budget week because what is normally a extravaganza is obviously quite different. What is on your agenda for the rest of of this vote?
We have asked the Department of Health to work with us starting next week on what the project plan might look like for our discussions for a new strategic agreement, and making sure that some of the really important strategic issues are on that project plan. So that will include, we're starting a new chapter, we've got a major win, but we're really only at the beginning. How are we going to do this? When are we going to meet? What information do we need to bring to each other in a transparent and collaborative way to build the project for developing the new strategic agreement? I think that also one of the most important things is communication to our members about achieving such a great win. We set out, over a year ago that we feel that removal of the offset policy was an important policy change that was required for listing of new medicines, and we've achieved that. What we want to do now is translate that into something that's useful for patients. There's no point in removing the offsets policy if patients are still going to be denied access to new medicines. So we have to look at the more strategic issues on how will this practically translate into getting access to medicines for patients.
Great. Liz de Somer, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.